Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This is the Facts and Fallacies podcast. My name is Cameron English. Very excited to be with you as always. That is Dr. Liza Lockwood. I should start using your actual name.
Everybody gets confused. That's okay.
Yes. Yeah. Very good to see you. I hope you all out there are having a lovely week. It's been busy. It's been exciting. I got to see the inside of a fire station today, which in my 37 years I've yet to do. It's pretty cool. I'd recommend it.
Yeah, they are very cool. Very cool. Birthday parties are fun.
Yes. Yeah. 4-year-olds especially dig fire stations. And I have a 1-year-old wandering around my office right now. So we'll see how this goes.
She might add nicely to the conversation.
She might. You might hear some drums in the background, maybe some Winnie the Pooh jingles. We'll just see which direction she goes. Yeah. In any case, we've got a story we're going to discuss today. This is from Genetic Literacy Project. It was originally published on a partner website of theirs called Unbiased Science. I think Andrea Love also writes for Unbiased Science, if I'm not mistaken. This is by Jess Steyer, and it's called How Well-Intended Mask Mandates and Lockdowns Fueled the Establishment Science-Skeptical MAHA Movement. I am overall encouraged to see a story like this, Liza. I'm seeing more and more of them. I think we still have a way to go in terms of our commentary on the pandemic, but what she's getting at here, and we'll go through some of the specifics, is that skepticism towards established medicine, established science, it's not often fueled by what people claim it's fueled by. So people will say, I don't believe the COVID vaccine is safe. But what that is, it's shorthand for I don't trust the CDC. I think Tony Fauci was lying to me, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the early points she makes in the story that I really appreciate is that it's a matter of trust. So it's not that, for example, people went and read the clinical trial in the New England Journal of Medicine of Pfizer's COVID shot. And they went, that's just the wrong endpoint. They're looking for the wrong outcome. And as a result, I'm not convinced this vaccine is safe and effective, right? That's not what most people did. That's not what they did. Right. Most people saw double standards. They saw hypocrisy from the scientific establishment. And as a result of that, they went, this vaccine is probably dangerous. And of course, there was a whole lineup of people like RFK Jr., Alex Berenson, pick your favorite name, who were ready for these people to go, you're right. You're so right. This vaccine.
Step right into the void.
Yes. Myocarditis, people fainting, menstrual cycles disrupted. They were just ready with everything. And I don't mean to say that there's no side effects, because there are. But I think that narrative was handed to people who wanted to
go in that direction.
Yes, they wanted to undermine trust in the science institutions. And it worked out perfectly. So I'm curious to get your thoughts. I think what I like most about this story is it illustrates that people in the mainstream are finally 5 years on cultivating an awareness of what's motivating the public to oppose them.
Yes, I think, the thing that took everybody by surprise was the backlash that resulted from the policies that were implemented during the COVID pandemic. And the pandemic's still there. It's still going on. It's not, people have acquired some herd immunity with a lot of vaccination. People are, starting to adapt to the pandemic just in general. What started out as a collective kind of, let's do the best we can for everybody because this is an unknown. And the outcomes have been pretty dramatic, and people have gotten seriously sick. She mentioned that 800 people died in one day in New York. New York was really overrun with significant fatalities. People took it very seriously. And the problem was that the 2 weeks to flatten the curve evolved into 2 years of children not going to school. And people who began to question that wound up getting sidelined by experts who were saying your children are going to kill granny, and really they lost out on so much school that I think it had a deleterious effect. And people are now starting to realize that the way the public health establishment managed the concerns of ordinary people was much more sort of from top on down, as opposed to trying to build trust and trying to sort of navigate through all of this together. We were all in it together. There are, outcomes. If the public health establishment, everybody got to go to work every day because they were quote unquote critical workers. If your livelihood was, owning a restaurant or owning a business that had a public outreach component to it, that business was shut down. And it wasn't only shut down for 2 weeks; it was shut. And so I think that public health people and physicians who didn't have their livelihoods taken away didn't have an appreciation for that kind of impact. And they kept, their notion was, well, health outweighs the importance of income. But their incomes weren't at risk. And so I think there were a lot of nuances to this that we badly missed the mark on. And it's going to take a lot to rebuild trust. And I'm glad to see articles addressing some of the direct things that made people unhappy.
Can you hear me? I don't know if okay. It says my mic is muted, but apparently it's not. So we're just going to roll with it.
Yep.
Okay. So a couple of things she says in here that I appreciate. There's a lot. She front loaded it with some really good observations. So she said, public health officials trained to focus on population level outcomes sometimes seem dismissive of individual concerns about economic hardship, social isolation, educational disruption. When guidelines changed, masks weren't necessary, then they were essential. 2 weeks to flatten the curve became months of restrictions. It made people feel that authorities either didn't know what they were doing or weren't being honest. I think this is mostly true, and I'm glad to see her saying it, but there's something about the framing here that I find a little concerning, and that is this emphasis on people's perceptions, right? Mm-hmm. These restrictions seemed unreasonable. People felt that they were overbearing. In reality, they were unreasonable and they were overbearing. People who couldn't pay their mortgages really suffered as a result of the lockdowns.
That's right.
I hear a lot today from people in our neck of the woods about, how cruel the anti-vaccine movement is to autistic people and how it denigrates them and it ignores their experience, thus and so. The lockdowns left a lot of people on the spectrum, a lot of young children with disabilities, without access to the education they need to live a relatively functional, normal life. And, when it comes to a subject like this, we're starting to get to the point where people will say, yeah, our bad, we were a little insensitive. But not only is there no realization that this did real harm, there's no attempt to make recompense. There's no effort to say, here's how we're going to fix this. It's just more like, we meant really well and we're very smart and, maybe we went over the line a little bit. Truce, we're still not quite getting what we need to get, I think.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people are very frustrated with the way things worked out, especially because, a lot of politicians, the whole thing sort of took on a partisan component very early on. When the vaccine arrived on the scene, it was the left that was not in power that was raising doubts about the vaccine, and then the left, when they came in power, were like, okay, well, the vaccine's going to be mandated now. And so, and then they pointed at the right saying, well, the right's doubting the vaccine and aren't they backwards? And it was just so divisive. It was just, I wish the political component had not played a part in the development of this, because I think that the animosity towards Trump and the animosity then towards Biden, the subsequent animosity towards Biden, really played a definitive role in people not trusting the vaccines. And they did it for political reasons, not for public health reasons. So that bled into the whole thing as well. So yes, it started out with masks, and with the masks, Tony Fauci was saying originally, oh, we don't need masks. And then he was like, oh no, we absolutely have to have masks. And that, and if you didn't wear masks, you're doing something terrible. But what he could have said in the beginning is there are not enough masks for healthcare providers, and the healthcare providers are on the front line, and so they need the masks. Instead of saying they don't work and then they do work and then you must wear them because they absolutely work, and you can wear any mask. It could be a cloth thing, which is not going to prevent the transmission of a viral infection. And so the messaging out of the gate was terrible. And then it just got progressively worse as politics bled into the whole thing. And people wound up not trusting anybody.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm always curious about is, when I hear these mea culpas and we do these, these think pieces where let's take stock of what went wrong, no one says, I wonder if it was a bad idea for governors of some of the largest, most populous, wealthiest states, before FDA authorized the vaccines, to declare that they were going to do their own review. Because you can't trust the Trump FDA, don't you know, right? Right. Yeah, so in the middle, this is in November 2020. I think Pfizer's shot was officially authorized the following month, in December 20th, like right around there, right?
Yep.
So they're rushing this review. They're trying to do all the administrative stuff while they're doing the trial so they can get these into production as quickly as possible to save lives. You have Jay Inslee, Gavin Newsom, and one other governor. They start this partnership and they go, we're going to have our departments of public health look over this vaccine and we're going to make sure that it's safe, right? The implication of this is we don't trust that the FDA is going to do a good job, which is comical. No disrespect to my state's public health department, but you guys are not equipped
to evaluate all the vaccines.
A groundbreaking mRNA vaccine. This is not your milieu. See, I told myself before this, I'm like, I'm not going to raise my voice. But anyways... So and this is a question, if we could get Jess on the show, I'd love to honestly get an answer from anyone in the science communication world. To what extent did that public statement from a governor, from multiple governors, who then turned around a few months later and said, you absolutely have to get this or your kids can't go to school. How do you think that impacted the public's trust of that vaccine and the vaccines that we're now trying to convince them to take?
That's exactly right.
Right?
That's exactly right. And that's the fallout from it. Kids are now, there's a huge measles outbreak. Several people are dead. And it's entirely preventable illness. And it's because of the way that this was rolled out and the distrust that was built because of political expediency. If it hadn't been politicized, it would have. I think it would have been much better. And that is a big lesson going forward. Is as soon as you start politicizing things and pointing your fingers at other people, you're really going to cause a divide and a lot of distrust. Especially when you say everybody's got to get vaccinated except for my favorite political groups, right? And that came from California.
It sure did. I wrote an article about that. The local press, the regional press here, I think it was San Francisco Chronicle, there were a few big papers that covered it, and the framing from them was really funny. It was like, don't you know we're trying to be authoritarians here? We can't be good do-gooders if you keep contradicting yourself in public, right? We can't be hall monitors if you break the rules, right? The mayor of San Francisco went out to a live concert, and she flouted all the rules. She was dancing and singing and drinking, and right, she's making all of these public health gurus look like fools. And when they called her on it, she said, I was just in the spirit. I was feeling the groove.
Or going out to a fancy restaurant where other restaurant owners have to shut down.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And when we talk about this, Gavin Newsom goes on Charlie Kirk's podcast to hype his political prospects with center-right people. And Kirk goes, what do you have to say about this French Laundry controversy? And Gavin slaps himself in the head. He goes, oh, what a dunce. How foolish of me, right? I got to own that. And then they move on. It's like, why is it? I agree, babe. I agree. Why isn't the entire scientific establishment coming out and saying, you are the leader of the one of the biggest states, the biggest state in the country, one of the biggest economies in the world. You're flouting your own rules. You're making obviously political decisions.
Yep.
Nobody cares. It bugs me to this day. I just can't wrap my head up right. As we talked about in our space, the American Academy of Pediatrics is suing the federal government over RFK's vaccine policy. Good for you. Right. Go for it. Tell people the truth about pediatric vaccines. Yes and amen. Can you please, for the love of all that is holy, go to a politician who I assume is on your team?
Yep. And
go, look, man, you're killing us right now.
That's right.
And no one's going to do it. I just don't see that. I don't see that.
No. No, it's funny. It's like alliances are more important than truth. And it's totally undermined science. And I think that's why you're seeing not just vaccine hesitancy, but the whole drive to dismantle the medical journals, the whole drive to dismantle the regulatory agencies. I mean, RFK Jr. taking apart the vaccine panel, the ACIP panel. That's not good. That is not good. Those people were charged with making incredibly complicated decisions about vaccines, and they are. That was a very serious committee, and now it's got Robert Malone and a variety of other people on it that you can't. Who they're not at the caliber of people like Paul Offit, and who really can make real policy recommendations regarding vaccines. But we've lost credibility. And the question is, how do we get it back?
That's a great question. Let me see if I can take a stab at this as we go through. Is it Dr. Steyer? I don't know what her credentials are.
I think she is Dr. Steyer.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll give it the benefit. Dr. Steyer. So a few things. As I said, I love the framing of the article for the most part. She makes some important observations. But as we go on, I get, I just don't know what to say. I don't understand how we can keep repeating some of the things that were said during the pandemic and continue to be said. So one of the things she says in here is she says masks worked then and masks work now. Now, everybody says this as an article of faith, and I get intuitively that it makes some sense, right? Like if you have some kind of a respiratory infection and you put something over your face, it seems like it's going to make a difference. And I think it does in certain circumstances. Everyone loves to say, well, do you want surgeons to operate without masks? It's like, no, that's
I don't want boogers in my abdomen.
Right. That's actually an excellent example of where we have very good clinical data showing that it makes a difference.
Yep.
But when we go into a community setting, and this is the thing, like, look, all I'm doing is going to the journals and I'm reading this stuff. This is a quote from Michael Osterholm. He is like one of the leading authorities on masking and infectious diseases. He was interviewed by Nature, one of the biggest journal in the world, in October 2020. And they're talking about the research that's been done on masking. And they're going, there's some gaps here. These studies are not great. And then they quote Osterholm, and he says, he wears a mask, yet he laments the lack of scientific rigor that has been so far brought to the topic. We criticize people all the time in the science world for making statements without any data, he says. We're doing a lot of the same thing here. Now, to be clear, he's an advocate of masking. He was throughout the pandemic. He's done lots of writing about why they have benefits. But nevertheless, that's a very key quote. That's him saying.
Well, not to mention the fact that the way people wear masks, the N95 masks, which decrease transmission, have special fitting and you're not wearing them for 6 weeks in a row, right? The way that the public was wearing masks is not going to be preventative of, especially the cloth masks. And I said the cloth masks early on. I was like, you're swatting mosquitoes with a tennis racket that way, right? It's not gonna prevent you from getting this disease.
A couple more, because I just want to stack the deck here and show, like, look, this isn't Robert Malone's Substack. This is like, no. These are eminent experts on this question. Science, June 2021. Randomized clinical trials have shown inconsistent and inconclusive results, with some studies reporting only a marginal benefit or no effect of mask use. Thus, surgical and similar masks are often considered to be ineffective. Now, that's June 2021. The last quote was from October 2020. That means throughout the pandemic, we had major journals coming out and going, evidence for this, not great. Maybe as a precaution, we can encourage people to do this. But I read these statements, masks work then and they work now. Okay, well then, somebody take this on. Because I see a lot of articles, even today, a lot of really respectable people whose work I value. Hold on, my daughter's got some change and I got to prevent that. So I'll be right back.
Public health intervention.
Sorry, 1-year-olds and pennies don't mix, in case anyone.
No, they don't. No, they don't mix.
Okay. Anyways, all I'm trying to say is that you have these studies coming out. They're very clearly saying this isn't very good evidence, and then I'm on a tangent. What can I say? Cochrane collaboration, right? This is like the eminent institution for doing systematic reviews and meta-analyses. Mm-hmm. The Cochrane Review, 2023. There is uncertainty about the effects of face masks. The pooled results of randomized controlled trials did not show a clear reduction in respiratory viral infection with the use of medical surgical masks. There were no clear differences between the use of medical and surgical masks compared with N95 P2 respirators and healthcare workers when used in routine care to reduce respiratory viral infections. My son's home and he's very excited. Okay, so now here's the point I'm making. This research is all coming out. People are commenting on this, but they are insisting when they would look at some of the studies that were in the Cochrane Review and they would go, the confidence intervals are really wide, so we can't exclude the fact that there is a protective effect. That is not epidemiology. That's complete garbage. That's just
not. And just because it doesn't go with the popular narrative doesn't make it wrong, right? Tony Fauci started out by saying that they didn't work, and then he said they did. And then there were all sorts of reasons why they didn't work, and there was clear documentation that they didn't. Now, once again, if you had your mask properly fitted and all of this, there probably was some reduction in transmission. But that's not the way ordinary people live. They don't live in N95 masks. And so I think that to give it all of the weight that they gave it and to make people feel like they were doing something terrible if their 2-year-old wasn't masked, throwing kids off planes and all sorts of stuff like that. It's not the way to do this.
One more example here. You remember when I think it was 2022, that study in Bangladesh came out and everyone was like, here it is, the concrete proof that masking reduces transmission. Well, you read the paper, it was largely conducted outside. Yes. Okay? You know why? Because Bangladesh has open air markets. It's a very poor country. They don't have, state-of-the-art grocery stores for the most part, right? So there's these open air stalls where they do most of their commerce. That has no bearing on indoor masking. And yet I saw NBC and CBS and ABC, all the media outlets championing this paper. I saw everyone in science doing the same thing. And all you had to do was read it and go, okay, this isn't nothing, but it's not what you're making it out to be.
Well, it's actually if you look at sort of what happened across the Midwest versus what happened in New York City. Across the Midwest, you had a much lower incidence, and it was because people are naturally socially distanced, right? They're not. You don't have 9 million people crossing 30 square miles of Manhattan in squashed in subway cars and living on top of each other. You've got people who are in separate housing and in cars that are like separate from each other. So there was this natural barrier as is. And if you were outside, the risk of transmission was low.
The point I'm getting at. Oh, this is just getting me. I'll explain why in a minute. So, so these individual studies would come out and people would say, here's the evidence, masking works, Then Cochrane takes all of them and bundles it up into a meta-analysis and goes, pretty small effect. We don't know what to say. Now they came out later and they're like, we're not saying that masks don't work. That's been misinterpreted, right? Now, what they clearly did say in the paper was there's no evidence that they're very effective.
Right.
So the Cochrane meta-analysis comes out. Everyone goes, well, the studies you included are all bad. The studies you included are all bad. Therefore, we can keep wearing masks and we can keep lecturing you if you don't want to wear one. Okay. So the individual study comes out. It's fine. It's good, right? It serves the purpose. Well, we bundle them all together. Well, those are all bad studies, right? Like, you can't do this. It's the same thing with the lockdowns, right? Why was there no flu season for 2021, 2022? Well, because everyone was locking down and social distancing. Why is COVID everywhere? Well, no one's locking down or social distancing. It can't be both. My head is going to explode. Like this, if you cannot tell, this fundamentally shifted my perspective on science communication, on major science institutions, because you're like, you just float out these things and you just expect people not to notice what's going on. And I can't understand.
And you know what? If it's something that is not going to like ricochet throughout the whole society and really undermine, children's education, people's, ability to feed themselves, their economic ability. Then that's one thing. If it is 2 weeks to flatten the curve, that's one thing. It's an entirely different thing when you're talking about a prolonged, enforced situation that did not have a significant public health effect. And it's the reason why here we are in 2025, 5 years later, with RFK in office.
Back to Dr. Steyer's article here. So she says, unlike societies with stronger collectivist orientations or higher baseline trust in expert authority, American political culture has always been skeptical of being told what to do, especially by distant institutions. I want to return to that in a second. But before we do, I want to recall the Summer of Love in 2020, right? We've talked a lot about the riots that broke out and the destruction and all the chaos, right? I like everyone's watching this on TV. There's a deadly virus on the loose.
Yep.
The door to my church at the time was a public community center.
Lock.
They bolted it shut so I couldn't go in this open air facility and attend church. Downtown in the same city where I live, buildings on fire because we have to protest systemic racism. I watched, this is the moment, I don't think I've ever said this on the show. This is the moment I went, I'm done with this. I watched an elderly couple standing in front of their storefront in one of these cities. I don't know if it was Minnesota or whatever, trying to keep looters away. This man walks up with a 2x4 and he holds it up to beat this woman, to hit this elderly woman. Her husband, who's a frail old man, he steps in and he goes, "You get away from my wife." The guy smashes him in the temple with the 2x4 and then goes after the woman and hits her in the neck. And they both go down because they're frail. I'd go down if you hit me with a 2x4.
Yeah.
I watched that. And then a few days later, I watched NPR and every other clown college of a news outlet run stories to the
about
effect,
why that was okay.
Right. The science community says protesting systemic racism is acceptable. While this
because
novel
the virus
pathogen
is not going to, yes, the virus is not going to bother this.
You know?
That is what did it for me too. That is exactly what did it for me. because they made exceptions. They didn't make exceptions for people who owned small businesses, people who wanted to go to church, people who wanted to bury their loved ones. They absolutely not. You guys are bad for wanting to put other people at risk. But in this case, and I think that was the turning point for most people who really wound up, that totally undermined it. And then things that you found out after the fact wound up really exacerbating that.
Yeah.
Like the whole New York COVID czar situation.
Group sex and ecstasy for Dr.
Because his response was, I had to live my actual self or whatever. You, physician, get to do that, and you're telling people that their kids can't go to school?
He just had to blow off some steam, Liza. We all got to, every once in a while, you and your wife got to get together and have group sex and do illegal drugs. It's
mind blowing. And I know people get upset when we say that when we bring this up, but it was stuff like this that pushed people absolutely against the public health establishment.
But here's the question. Why are you mad at us for talking about it and not him for doing it? Do you see the absurdity? And I know there are people out here who do not like me because I bring this up. You're going to get through this, or you can just ignore me. Either one's fine. If you have a problem with me objecting to a pediatrician doing ecstasy, which, by the way, you can't buy at CVS. It's not Tylenol, right?
No.
Ecstasy, group sex, and hey, right? If that's your thing, I think the consequences of that are terrible, but I'm not going to monitor you. But I absolutely refuse to take public health
medical
guidance.
Advice.
I just won't do it. I won't.
From somebody who's doing that stuff.
I just won't. And then again, no one's going to talk about J Pharma because he's on Team Science. Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to talk about any of the infectious disease experts that stood by and clapped like seals while old people got beat up in front of their shops. No one's going to talk about that. So I want to return to this point about these rebellious Americans. But before we do that, because she mentions the social contract in the story, people perceive that these policies were a violation of the social contract. I don't think the social contract is the thing. I didn't sign one, right? I have to pay a mortgage every month because I signed a mortgage and I said, I'll pay you this much every month if I get to live in this house, right? That's a real contract. The social contract thing that everybody loves to talk about, it's just some hypothetical, right?
Yes, and if we're going to have this hypothetical agreement, it's a two-way street then, right? It should be a two-way street. It's not that one group gets to do whatever they want and the other one is going to sit by passively.
Yeah. There you go. It's just common sense. So, if we're talking about social contracts, I perceive that beating up old people in front of their business violates the social contract. Okay. So let's factor that into our discussions and let's adamantly denounce that. Doesn't matter what the cause is. It doesn't matter why people are doing it.
That's exactly right.
You as a scientist, right? Your thing is public health, right? What's the public health effect of swatting an old person in the head with a 2x4, right?
That's exactly right. Okay. That's exactly right.
All right. I don't mean to be graphic, but I don't know what else to do at this point to get people to. So, and this thing about, Americans are so rebellious and we don't like authority. And we don't have any sense of community and we don't have this collective identity. And if we only had that, then we could work together. For the last 40 years and longer, like my entire lifetime, we have mocked people for being nationalists. That's a naughty word, right? If not that there's anything wrong with you, but if you're just patriotic and, you say the Pledge of Allegiance and you really like 4th of July, like if you love your country and, you say, I love my family, I love where I come from, I love my heritage, you were mocked by these same people in the academy for being jingoistic and bigoted. And don't you know, we're all global socialites and, we're all this brotherhood of humanity, right? And people felt like, no, like I'm from here. I love it here. So you attack that. You attack this sense of identity that people have. You systematically attack institutions like religion and community organizations, again, any sort of regional loyalty. You dismantle these things that give people identity, right? The things that connect one person to another. It's like being involved in a church, for example. That bonds people in a very special way. Being a part of a community group, right? That bonds you in a very special way with people who live in your neighborhood. Excuse me, and nationally, right? Like, you're an American, I'm an American. We have a shared language and a shared set of cultural values, and we see the world the same way, right? Those are healthy values to hold to. Those things have been systemically, to use a very popular word, right? Those have been systemically and consistently attacked for decades.
Yep.
So you break apart these bonds that keep people together. You turn everyone into this sort of atomized individual. And then people all go, okay, well, I don't trust you. I don't like you. You've told me, right, that this half of the population is the oppressor. This one is the oppressed. You're the villain. You're the victim. You're going to give lots of money to this group. You're going to, right, we're going to give special consideration to these people in college and employment and government benefits. And it's all your fault because your ancestors may or may not have done something terrible, right? So, and we don't have to debate all of those things. But you can't set up that sort of a cultural situation and then go, why are you so selfish? Why do you think so much about yourself? Don't you know that we're a country and we're supposed to work together? And we have these experts
really hard to defend.
Right? Again, I've quoted this book before, Robert Nisbet's The Quest for Community. He wrote this book in the 1950s, and he's talking about this rapid social evolution where we are starting to see people, instead of members of a group, we're seeing them as individuals. They're economic actors, they're free thinkers, whatever, right? So this has been going on for a long time.
Yes, it has.
And that leaves people, not only does it leave them alone, it leaves them vulnerable, it leaves them fearful and anxious because we're social creatures by nature.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've let, you know what I mean? We strip these things away from people, and then they react really strangely to public health guidance.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You've got everybody in their own echo chamber with their phones and completely involved with their phones and separated from other people, and getting this repeat messaging over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, why aren't you, being part of our group? It's and part of a bigger group for the betterment of humankind. Well, yes, if you take it down to that and destroy the family and things like that, you're going to have a completely different outcome than you're expecting.
Yeah. Here's a quote, I'm sorry, I'm just going for it today. I don't really.
That's fine.
So this is a quote from Quest for Community. He's quoting Nisbet was a sociologist. He's quoting another social scientist here. So he says, the uneasiness, the malaise of our time is due to this root fact. In our politics and economy, in family life and religion, in practically every sphere of our existence, the certainties of the 18th and 19th centuries have disintegrated or been destroyed, and at the same time, no new sanctions or justifications for the new routines we live and must live have taken hold. Among white-collar people, the malaise is deep-rooted, for the absence of any order of belief has left them morally defenseless as individuals and politically impotent as a group. So that's this is super deep into the social science world. I don't expect an immunologist or whatever to have read this. Mm-hmm. But you need to reflect on this and this is the thing, in the natural sciences, we've got our tropes, right? Like Dunning-Kruger, Brandolini's law. There's all of these things about how people outside of our tribe are stupid and they're not well read and they don't understand the world. But then people in science, they go and pontificate about economics and politics and religion and all, they just go off on these things.
They do on certain things, but then they won't have the guts to stand up on other things. And so they were pontificating. A lot of people were pontificating about, the masking and COVID vaccines and all of this kind of stuff, and how and the social contract and blah, 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 blah. But those very same people would not weigh in on things that turned out to be wrong and things that are currently going on. So like we said in our pod or in our space earlier, the American Academy of Pediatrics has taken on RFK Jr. They're suing him and HHS for their vaccine issue, but they also, on the flip side, won't stand up for what science when it comes to endocrine disruption. They make the claim that tiny traces of BPA or plastic are fundamentally harming children, and we need to ban that all. But then they'll turn around and say it's perfectly okay to put kids on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. And what ordinary people are like, well, wait a minute, aren't those hormones? Isn't that an endocrine disruption? Oh, if you guys don't understand the science. Well, what do you mean we don't understand the science? And I feel like there are very many people in the scientific realm who may be a little uncomfortable about this, and they think that maybe it's not okay to do this, but they don't want to step out of line because they are crossing some pretty powerful people, and so they'll be, if it's in their lane, they will say something. But if it's not in their lane and it's clearly something that the public is kind of confused about, I don't see how scientists can't understand how we got to this position when there has been so much misinformation about so many different topics that the public's like, okay, I'm throwing the whole baby out with the bathwater.
Oh, they know. They absolutely know. And the reality is, I get the pressure, right? Like if you work in the academy, if you're an academic scientist, and you decide to put up a blog that says this transgender thing is all an evil charade, and we are doing permanent damage to children in the name of this ridiculous ideology, right? Like, if you say that, I can say that because I just don't care. I will go bag groceries and I'll go to my grave with my integrity. I just absolutely refuse to have any part of this. I don't care. I just don't care. Yep. Now, maybe most people are uncomfortable with that. Maybe they don't have that option. Maybe they don't want it. I get it. But you can't pick and choose like this and then go. And this is the thing, right? When I was coming of age, right, this whole new atheist thing was coming on. Mm-hmm. And it was people like Sam Harris, who's still a very prominent character today for some reason.
Richard Dawkins
Right. These people were like, they were trying to displace religion with science. Like, they wanted this new epistemology, right? Those are fairy tales. Those are dumb ancient people. Don't believe all that silliness. Believe the science, right? Science, science, science. I'm a rebel. I'm a free thinker. I'll depose the institutions, right? Poor Galileo, I'm too stupid to know any history, but I'm going to, you know what I mean? Like, I'll tear down everything that you hold dear. And then we get to something like this. And all of these people, all of the free thinkers, all of this whole thing, right? It's like, well, I'm not going to talk about it. Like, that could, right? It's not okay now, right? Like, I'm not allowed to mock this institution.
History rhymes, though, right? I mean, the Enlightenment begat the French Revolution and the Jacobins. And here we are again with a magazine called Jacobin. And this whole kind of worshiping of science, right, to the detriment of humanity. I think science is very important, and scientific advances have brought great importance to humanity, and have advanced us. But you can't get us. Castrating children is getting towards a revolution that is not acceptable.
And then people, again, like with the Jay Varma thing, people are like, you guys are pretty radical in your opposition. You're like, yes, I am. Mm-hmm. And the question is, why are you not? Yeah. Why are you not? Like, why will you write 1,000 articles about why AAP is stupid and they're ridiculous to oppose the use of glyphosate? Why will you say that, but you won't turn around and go, you can't put a kid on a prostate cancer drug to interfere with their puberty.
You're destabilizing by doing both of those things. You're actually destabilizing society.
Ugh. Oh my goodness.
Anyway, now that we've made our perspectives kind of clear.
And look, I'm not taking this to her personally, right? I think there's just this kind of culture where people have been trained to say certain things, right? So now the kind of zeitgeist is, yeah, we went too far. And, you know, there's one thing she says in here, though, that I found a little troubling. So she says, I got to find it. Hold on. I'm sorry. This is great.
No worries.
This is great radio here. You know, so I mentioned earlier, right? Like that you had this movement of scientists attacking religion. Well, she says in this story, she says, the assertion of individual choice has collective consequences that can't be prayed away. So even like, come on now, right? This is the whole backfire thing that everyone likes to wax poetic about. Even in a story where you're acknowledging that people perceived that they were wronged, you're still making these condescending comments about their religious beliefs. Why would you do that? In an article about why science has misunderstood, right?
Yeah,
you're still
alienated huge swaths of the population.
You're still mocking people who are praying. Like, you know, as I said, I go to church, I pray, but I don't try to pray away infectious diseases. Who are you talking about?
That's exactly right.
Right?
And,
do you interact with anyone that you're talking about?
It's the same kind of thing. I don't know if you saw that piece on NPR. Is it her name? Catherine Marr, who's the CEO of NPR. She was talking about how it's a shame that NPR is getting taken down because it's often the only access that rural communities have to the news. And it's like, and being from Missouri, I'm very acutely aware of what Californians and New Yorkers think of flyover country, even though they've never been here. And they are always stunned to hear kind of my thought process about a lot of different things, because I think they think we're a bunch of hillbillies that don't know anything.
Yeah.
And until you come here and you spend a little time here and understand, no, people have, they can reason pretty well.
Yeah. It's just, I think what it betrays a lack of understanding. There's a lack of wisdom here. This is almost, I don't know if I should use this word. It's almost like you're aping the things that should be said at this point, but you don't actually have the emotional reaction that would prompt you to say that. You can call that whatever you want, right? Like things are being said that people don't really believe, and that maybe they're not capable of believing. But in the current thing, you go, yeah, like we meant really well. It's like, well, if I accidentally shoot my neighbor and he dies and I meant really well, I thought he was an intruder, right? I would still go to prison for manslaughter. But there's no consequences. Are you okay? I'll take another 5 minutes. There's just one other thing I wanted to get.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay. So she makes the point in here. I hear this all the time too. You Americans and your freedoms, and you're all so stubborn and you're all so selfish. Look, if you went back to colonial America, if you went back a little bit, even more recently to the founding period, yes, they were strong believers in individual rights and private property and free speech, all the things that you find in the Constitution. The average progressive, or even the average liberal, tolerance, man, like the average person today would find the founding era of the United States absolutely stifling.
They would.
Like strict gender roles, strict participation in religion, not because anybody was forced to, but it was just, it suffused the culture, right? You had individual,
Salem.
You had individual, they consider them countries, but you had individual states with established churches. So in other words, these were, by today's standards, very collectivist societies.
Yep.
Right? Now they still had beliefs and rights, but again, this is one of these tropes where it's like, I'm a modern and I'm so smart and I have Amazon Kindle and I can Google things. And I have
That's
a
right.
graduate degree. You know, I pour chemicals on cells. I'm going to talk about whatever I want, right? Like, you know,
Right.
it's like, I don't know.
Yep.
I think I've made the point. I hope. Hopefully I haven't
think-
pissed off everybody in the world. I think I may have, but
That's okay. They'll get over it. Hopefully.
But
Hopefully.
go read this article. I'm glad we're having this discussion at least.
Yes, it's a discussion that needs to be had. We need to start moving back towards the middle. We need to find some grace where we can forgive each other for things. But condescension is not where it's going to get there. So we've got to recognize that mistakes were made. I think we have to apologize for said mistakes and then try to figure out how to muddle through to make things better, because we do have a wonderful society and we do have a wonderful country. And I think we have an incredible scientific establishment, and the vast majority of people in that scientific establishment are good, hardworking, well-meaning people that are creating some incredible breakthroughs for the future. And because of this distrust and they're staying in their lane, they're trying not to rock the boat, and maybe they should have rocked the boat a little bit, but we in order to not go off the rails in the opposite direction, we need to start really thinking about how to repair this. And it's going to take a lot of work.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm encouraged by recent developments. We talked about some of them at our space today. I think, as unfortunate as the whole MAHA thing is, I think this is the hangover after the binge.
Yep.
Right? This is really bad. Don't get me wrong. Like, Kennedy is this guy's an evil. What are the evil Jedi? A Sith, right? Like, this guy's bad news. He's going to do a lot of harm if he stays in for 4 years. I hope he just gets pissed off and leaves at some point.
Well, I'm hoping we don't have a Lysenko kind of scenario, right?
Yeah.
That really affects everybody.
Yeah. I'm hoping that other people get in the presidency and they go, you got to be done with this guy. You got to, you know what I mean? But nevertheless, you know, this is the reaction, right? I think people, and we talked about this at the space, like there are certain people in science. There are children's hospitals that are shutting down these absurd clinics. There are people like Jamie Reed out there. People are starting to see that this was a bridge too far, and people are not going to put up with it. So I'm hoping that that's going to swing the pendulum back, and the temperature will calm down. That's all I can hope for. But here we are.
Same. Here we are. Tomorrow's another day.
Yeah.
This too shall pass.
Yeah. I'm gonna go celebrate my son's birthday tomorrow and have a great time. So. Everyone have a terrific weekend. Once again, this story that served as rocket fuel for my emotions today was called How Well-Intended Mask Mandates and Lockdowns Fueled the Establishment Science Skeptical MAHA Movement. This is by Jess Steyer, published at Genetic Literacy Project, originally at Unbiased Science. As I said, despite my criticisms and frustration, there's some good insights in here that I hope become more widespread as we go on. So.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us. On X, it's at Dr. Liza MD. I'm at Cam J. English, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.